Welcome back to the Ultraviolet Tide. This is January's episode of the Top 5 on the Tide, and I have Leah Adams joining me. Leah, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Erica, and happy 2025 to all of our listeners.
It's so crazy. We are in the new year. We are both sitting down with a winter storm howling outside of our windows, which is quite the way to be introduced to the new year and winter. But I do want to ask, okay, because a lot of people have been all over the place when it comes to New Year's resolutions this year. Did you make a New Year's resolution?
I can't just pick one. Like, it's just not, I'm so indecisive. I'm such a Libra. So
My
I
little
make like a list.
overachiever.
No, I don't know. I want to make like a list. So I have like a list of things I want to achieve this year, goals I want to achieve, things I want to focus on. So I have New Year's resolutions.
Love it.
Plural. But what about you, Erica? Do you have one or many?
Oh my God, it's so funny because normally I'm on the same wavelength. Normally it's like, how do you choose one when there's like so many different aspects of your life that you want to focus on, like, personal, work, like fitness, all of those things, they kind of fall into different life categories. So I'm normally the same, but it is so funny. Someone asked me on January 1st, like, what's your New Year's resolution? And I was like, to be patient with myself. I feel like that's like the only thing as I'm
Yeah.
going into like this new season of life that makes sense for me right now because I don't know what motherhood's going to be like. And I don't want to set some like crazy standards and resolutions for myself. So I'm like, I'm just going to be patient and figure it out as I go along and see what happens and go from there.
100%. Well, I think that that's great, like to set that intention and resolution, whether you're becoming a mom or not. I think we all need to be more
Yeah.
patient and gentle with ourselves. I think that's a really good thing to focus on in the new year.
Yeah. What's so funny is I remember having this conversation with you last year, Leah, and we were talking about like social media, and you were talking about, okay, well, one of my goals, one of my resolutions is I want to get 10,000 followers on Instagram. And you legit crushed it. You did it like with months and months to spare.
Yeah, that was definitely a very big highlight for last year. And we'll see what happens this year. We'll see. I don't know. I didn't set a number goal for that, so I think we're just gonna wing it.
Yeah, no, I love it. It's going to be great things for 2025. I just know it. This community
Mhm.
continues to grow and educate and progress, and it is so exciting to watch it. And I know it's only going up, like this education and like kind of the momentum that everyone has gained when it comes to sharing their stories and like advocating and making sure their voices are heard. Like it's only growing. It's not going away anytime soon. And I feel like more people get inspired each and every day. So I'm excited for the new year. I'm excited to see what happens. And I'm also really, really excited for today's episode topic because it is freezing cold here in the States, especially in Virginia, but it is toasty warm in Australia and New Zealand and the countries in the Southern Hemisphere. And Leah and I touch base every single month before we kind of pull together what the top 5 on the Tide episode is going to look like. And we talk about things that are top of mind, maybe stories that we've read, things that would be super pertinent to this community to talk about. And because it is summer in the Southern Hemisphere, I'm getting so many stories sent my way about Australia and New Zealand and melanoma incidence rates. So today we are pulling all stories about that topic. And I'm so excited, Leah, because I know in the past we pulled stories that have quoted dermatologists, top dermatologists who are based in Australia and doing really innovative work. So I'm excited to dive more into this because I don't think we've really shared why Australia has such high incident rates and some of the stories surrounding what's going on there.
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely something that's been a long time coming that we've hinted at on previous podcast episodes. And to your point, Erica, we've said, melanomas has the highest rates in Australia, but we never really took the time to dive in. And so that's the point of today's episode. And I know you have some stats and things to share before we dive into our article. So, Erica, if you want to touch on that to kick us off, it'll kind of be a good starting point for today's episode.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to share so many stats today just so we can kind of really paint a full picture of what things look like in Australia and New Zealand. And one of the first charts as I was doing research for this episode was from Statistica. And it was talking about how Australia has the highest rates of skin cancer, saying that it's about 37 um, cases per 100,000 people per year. And what I found was super fascinating is it broke down different countries. So, Australia being the top one for the incidence rates that they're seeing. The next was New Zealand. And what I thought was super interesting is that their rates of skin cancer are just about as high, but their rates of death due to melanoma are significantly higher. So they actually have the highest mortality rate due to skin cancer. And in this case, it's all melanoma. So I thought that was super interesting to kind of highlight and share the statistics on that because it really tapers out from those two countries. And then at like the very end of the chart, you have the rest of the world and such a small percentage, which is crazy to think about, Leah, because I know when we talk about melanoma and skin cancer in the United States, we have so many incident rates here in the US that to put it on a scale like that is kind of mind boggling. That's just how prevalent it is in Australia and New Zealand.
Yeah, no, definitely. When you shared the chart with me before this episode, Erica, I guess I never really knew it was that bad in that part of the world. And, when you think of like their climate and really, we've talked about this on past episodes too, like the lifestyle in warmer climates of just consistent sun exposure, the strength of the UV rays, the lifestyle of going to the beach and maybe looking tan or being tan and all that kind of stuff. I mean, when it's a part of life and a part of, culture, the dots kind of connect, right? Overexposure of, sun and UV rays can lead to skin cancer and melanoma. And then you mix in, what is their family history? Do they have a lot of
Mhm.
moles? What is their ethnicity? When you put all that together, it just really heightens somebody's risk of
Right.
skin cancer.
Right. And then you also tie in going off of that sunless tanning devices, what is the rate of self tanning? I know that there's been huge pushes in Australia to ban the tan, just like it is here in the US. But I know that there is a huge culture around being tan there. But you absolutely hit the nail on the head when it comes to, Australia, New Zealand, very close to the equator. So they have those higher UV rates throughout the year. So they have a higher likelihood of developing these kinds of skin cancers just due to basic overexposure from living their daily life. And then another chart I pulled that I thought was super fascinating is it talks about the incident rates of melanoma in Australia by age group. And I always like to break it down by age group because it confirms what we already know, but then also opens the door to so many questions. So the chart talks about how the incident rate increases with age, which we know. We know that so well that it increases with age. And the 85 to 89-year age group has the highest estimated incidence rate, which
Mm-hmm.
again, I feel like we know this information. But at the same time, you know that those younger generations are, still getting these cancers and melanomas. So again, this reflects what we know about skin cancer being the result of cumulative sun damage, but I feel like there's still a lot of questions as to, okay, here's this cumulative sun damage who are individuals between 85 and 89. Okay, but what about the younger generations? What's happening there? Because we're certainly seeing cases there that I'm imagining have increased as well.
Right. No, absolutely. And I think the articles we're going to share today are going to touch on a lot of these statistics and, why this is happening there. And I think the first article that will start today's episode, all of these articles are going to involve Australia and New Zealand, as Erica mentioned at the beginning of the episode. So just so everybody knows that. And the first one is from a news source of Bristol Myers Squibb. And the article is "The Spot Sends a Message to Australians About Skin Cancer and Melanoma." So, as we just talked about, the article talks about how Australia has one of the highest rates of skin cancer globally, with approximately 2/3 of Australians expected to be diagnosed with some form of skin cancer during their lifetime. So, before we get into what the Spot had to say in this article, or what they were kind of talking about, let's just dive quickly into the three different types of skin cancer so our listeners are aware. So there's basal cell carcinoma, that's BCC, and it accounts for about 2/3 of skin cancers. Squamous cell carcinoma, also abbreviated SCC, represents about 1/3 of skin cancers. And then melanoma, which ironically, even though it's the fastest spreading and deadliest type, it is compromised for about 1% of skin cancers, but it, as the article mentioned, most dangerous form. So as you can tell, the most common are BCCs or SCCs. Melanoma, it's more rare, but it is the most dangerous. So over 95% of skin cancers are attributed to exposure from ultraviolet radiation, also known as UV rays. UV radiation is invisible and not related to temperature. It can cause damage even on cool or cloudy days. Mm-hmm. So that's something to always be mindful of. And what this article was really honing in on was the Spot Sculpture Initiative, which was Bristol Myers Squibb, which is a pharmaceutical company, had a collaboration with La Roche-Posay, which is a phenomenal skincare brand. I use a lot of their products and their sunscreen. And they also partnered with Ogilvy. I don't know how to pronounce that, but Ogilvy and Sculpture by the Sea introduced the Spot sculpture to raise awareness about skin cancer prevention and early detection. This sculpture, really cool. I saw this on social media and I was like, this is awesome. The sculpture expanded to 20 meters during the exhibition and was later displayed at Parliament House in Canberra to promote sun safety and vigilance regarding skin changes. So really why they wanted to do this, they basically made this sculpture on a very popular beach in Australia, and they wanted to have people look at it and have a certain type of questioning, what is that? Why is that on our beach? What does that mean? And the initiative emphasizes that monitoring moles for changes in shape, color, or size, consulting healthcare professionals promptly, as early detection significantly improves treatment outcomes. So knowing that this sculpture was changing over time, as it mentioned, it was expanding to 20 meters during the whole exhibit. It was trying to symbolize what moles can do on skin. And so I thought it was a really cool thing that these collaborators were doing together, because in Australia, UV levels can damage unprotected skin throughout the year, not just during warmer months, underscoring the need for continuous sun protection. So I thought this was super cool. Erica, did you see this in the news, and did you get to see a photo of it? Because it was really cool looking.
It was really cool looking. I, like you, Leah, I saw it on social media. I feel like that's where I see 99% of these things before I see the news stories. So I saw it on social media and I thought it was really cool as well. And I also love that La Roche-Posay was involved. I completely agree where their products are kind of top tier in my mind. I love their sunscreen. I use their face wash. I love their body lotion. Their products are fantastic. So to see that they really teamed up with other organizations to talk about skin cancer prevention and early detection is fantastic. Obviously, it means fantastic things for their brand as well, because it's a little bit of promotion for their products, but it's so subtle that I love it. You can think about going and purchasing your sunscreen from La Roche-Posay, but it's not in your face branding. It leads with education, which is what I love to see. That warms my heart. And another thing you pointed out when you were talking about this story that I think is really fascinating, that I talk about all the time, is that you can't feel UV rays. A lot of people say that they feel like the warmth and they associate that with UV rays. It's not a thing, which makes it so much more damaging because you really can't feel it doing any kind of harm to your body, especially when you're already cold. If you're not feeling, the warmth on a cloudy day from the sun, you think you are getting no UV negative sun exposure whatsoever. And that is so far from the truth. So that's definitely something that I hear all the time where I'm like, that is a myth. That is not real. Like, we got to stop associating these two together.
Yeah, no, 100%. Great points on that. And yeah, it's so funny when I first saw the image online because I'm like, why are people reposting a picture of a giant rock on a beach? And I looked closer and I was just like,
Uh-huh.
oh my gosh, like that's a sculpture and it has to do with melanoma and skin cancer.
Yeah.
Like, how cool. Because I just assumed, we're in Lake Erie here. We don't have an ocean. We don't have like beautiful, like rock picturesque, like beach or anything like that. But Australia, I was just like a normal Australian beach. But then I started seeing how like the rock looked kind of pink and brown and black and like didn't
Hmm.
look right. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's supposed to be like representing a live mole growing. Like, I
Uh-huh.
just thought it was like such an innovative concept. And just imagine like the conversations that are starting with that, right? Like your family
Right.
just showing up to a beach that day and seeing that, and kids pointing at it and saying, what's that, mom? What's that, dad? And, or just like a group of friends. And I think that that's the biggest thing, is that if we have more conversations about this stuff and we create more awareness in the community. I mean, it's genius. Picking a popular beach, having something like that be there, that could be a reminder to somebody to put on sunscreen, to
Right.
schedule a skin check, to maybe seek shade, somewhere at that beach, like
Mhm.
so many things can come from that. So I applaud all of those organizations working together to make that initiative happen, because I believe that that made a positive impact on somebody making good decisions about their
Right.
skin health.
I agree. And you can only imagine that, kids going with their parents to the beach, they're seeing that and they might not understand it. But I know as a kid, those kinds of images get ingrained in your brain. Kind of a
Hmm.
super, super silly example is that when I was like very little, I was probably like 8. I remember we were in the car, we were driving down to the beach, and we got stopped at a stoplight next to a truck that was carrying all of the chickens for eating, and
Yeah.
they were all in cages, and I remember just in tears, like, asking my parents, like, "Why are they in cages? I don't understand it." And to this day, I will not eat anything but, like, free-range chicken and free-range eggs. Like, I refuse to let Matt and I buy anything
Oh,
else because that is so ingrained in my memory, and I was like, "Those chickens must be so sad." So those are
yeah.
kind of
Oh my
it's a
gosh.
silly example, but those are the kinds of things that get ingrained in young people's
Yes.
brains that
Yes.
affect how they live their life for years to come. So hopefully it made a fantastic impact. I mean, I know it certainly did because I saw that so many times on social media and people were resharing it. So really excited to see what they do in future too. I'm like, this is a cool installation. What are we doing next year? I'm kind of waiting to
Yeah,
see.
totally.
All right, so switching gears to our next story for all of our reality TV fans. So, Leah, have you ever watched Below Deck?
Sure have. Sure have.
I
I love a good
absolutely
reality TV show. I mean, this is like
I
right up my alley. Below Deck is awesome.
I love Below Deck too, and Leah and I are such reality TV fans that when I saw this one, I was like, okay, well, we're obviously going to talk about it. So, the source of this article is from People, and it is about how Below Deck Down Under's Captain Jason Chambers was diagnosed with melanoma. So, the charter captain and Bravo reality TV star from Below Deck Down Under posted a video on Instagram shortly before Christmas, giving an update on a recent biopsy from his abdomen. So he said in the caption, for someone that spent their life in the sun, as a child playing sports to working on the ocean, I thought I was resistant to the damaging effects of the sun. He continued, I love the sun and its health benefits are evident, but be wise, and like everything in life, it's all about balance. Choose your battles. With a diagnosed melanoma biopsy, I now have an anxious weight, and what I thought was a skin spot turned into just 6 months. I'm assuming he means turned into melanoma in just 6 months. And he continued and said, early detection is key. So, what he's talking about there, the anxious wait. So, he had a biopsy before Christmas. It came back as melanoma, and they said, hey, we need to do additional testing. Like, I don't think this is only stage 2. We need to check your lymph nodes. We might need to do a larger excision. So he's waiting on the results from kind of that second biopsy and additional treatment. And he really noted something that I know everyone in this community can relate to, that this was taken before Christmas. And he's like, well, now I have to wait possibly to the new year to hear something. And Leah, I know we hear this all the time, that we all want our healthcare providers to take the time they need to rest and recuperate. But man, those 2 weeks between Christmas and New Year's, when you're waiting for results and you're waiting to hear back and you're not going to hear anything, is so, so hard.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely so hard. And I've said this before, just feel like we're now in 2025. Like, how have we not found a way to accelerate biopsy results, like in a way, or invented something that can detect cancer like within like the skin check right then and there? I mean, terrifying, but also like super helpful in catching things even earlier, mitigating the waiting game that causes so much stress and worry and anxiety, especially during a time like Jason had to deal with, like during the holidays. And, I applaud anybody who opens up online or in the media that shares their story, that's a public figure, that's on reality TV or any type of TV. But I also really appreciate when it's a man, because we don't always hear men talking about their problems or their health.
Right.
And I think it's a huge opportunity for men to come forward and speak up about things that they're going through. Again, it's very sad that he's going through this, and, hopefully he gets results back soon on what needs to be done as far as treatment. But I really commend him for doing this, because I think so many other men could look at his story and be like, oh my gosh, like, I've had so many sunburns. I don't use sunscreen. I
Right.
haven't gone to a dermatologist. And his story may encourage other men, maybe that are his age or do what he does, maybe work on like near the ocean
Yeah.
or on a boat or something like that. Maybe they'll go and get their skin checked or wear sunscreen or what have you. So again, like, I love this type of domino effect that happens when something like this gets in the media and the story comes out, and it really opens people's eyes. And so, as much as I never like to see more and more people be touched with melanoma, this matters. His story matters, and it can have a ripple effect for something better.
Yeah, for sure. I think that is such a great point. And my brain was kind of going there too, Leah, of, if you're a man looking at a lot of these stories, you're like, okay, well, melanoma's not going to affect me because I don't go to the tanning beds. I'm not out with my girlfriends, sitting by the pool all summer. But maybe you're fishing, maybe you're surfing, maybe you are out, maybe you're a runner, maybe you're out running. So this is like, not to tie certain activities to male versus female, but sometimes it's a lot more relatable when you have a male celebrity talking about, well, I am a fisherman and I'm out on the water. And guess what? The water reflects those UV rays like nobody's business. And it starts to
Mhm.
get your brain kind of thinking that, okay, well, maybe I am not above this. Maybe I do participate in some activities where I should be taking it seriously. So I thought this was a great story. And he really ended it by saying that Australia is expecting a heat wave this summer, so the season that they're currently in. And he confessed that until this point, he was never really one to take sunscreen seriously. And he told everyone to not be like him and to take sunscreen seriously and protect your largest organ this summer.
Yes. Amen. Protect it all
Yeah.
year round. But yeah,
Yeah.
especially in the summer in Australia. Lord have
Yeah.
mercy. Speaking about the sun, let's talk about artificial, ways of getting sun damage, also known as tanning beds, which are awful. And I am a previous user of them. And other countries call them sunbeds, tanning beds. They're interchangeable terms. So this next article is called "I Use Sunbeds and I Didn't Think I Would Get Cancer." Like we all thought. I was one of those people as well. The source is BBC, and the article started off talking about some research that was done by a really awesome charity called Melanoma Focus that indicated that 37% of adults in Belfast use sunbeds, leading to the city being labeled the sunbed capital of the UK, which is very frightening. And in the article that ties back to Australia, there was an Australian dermatologist. His name is Jim Muir, and he describes the legality of sunbeds in Northern Ireland as insane, which I would agree.
We agree.
Emphasizing their significant link to increased melanoma risk, he notes that sunbeds, also known as tanning beds, have been banned in Australia for over a decade due to these risks. The article also highlights that melanoma skin cancer cases are increasing in the UK, underscoring the need for heightened awareness and preventative measures. Another individual in the article, Lynn Stevenson, former sunbed user and self-described sun worshiper, which again, I can relate, was that individual too, shares her experience of being diagnosed with malignant melanoma. She stresses that the risks associated with sunbeds and lack of sun protection are as serious as those linked to smoking and cancer, which I believe we've talked about on this podcast. If not, it's been shared a lot on social media as well. According to the Public Health Agency, the article notes that skin cancer accounts for more than 30% of all cancers detected in Northern Ireland, with about 400 cases of malignant melanoma and an average of 60 related deaths annually. So again, given knowing these risks, there are calls for Northern Ireland to follow countries like Australia and Brazil in banning sunbeds for cosmetic purposes to reduce skin cancer incidence. I'm just going to pause here and just say, I wish the United States would hop on this bandwagon too, because these tanning beds, they are killing people. I was lucky enough that my melanoma was caught early. If I never went in for that skin check, I don't know if I'd be here today, but I used tanning beds on and off for almost a decade of my life. And as you noted, Erica, in the first article, sun damage is cumulative. Whether you're getting it from the sun or whether you're getting it from a tanning bed or a sunbed, your skin remembers the damage that is being done and you can't reverse it. So I'm going to pause here before I go off on a tangent. Erica, what are your thoughts on this article and what are your thoughts on tanning beds as well? I think I know what you're going to say, but I'll let you have your moment.
We can both go on a tangent about this all day long. I think it's funny because I think when people think of the UK and Ireland, they don't think of sun. It is, two countries, two places that are very cloudy throughout most of the year. They're rainy. They're not close to the equator. They really don't see a lot of sun. So it's hard to understand, okay, well, how do they have melanoma and skin cancer? Like, how is this even possible? And the reality of tanning beds, even though they are banned now in so many places, you really are seeing the trickle down effect of when they were used. It's not like, okay, they were banned and people stopped using them and we're all good now. Like, there's still decades of use that is still going to present itself in your skin at some point in the future. So well, I think, banning tanning beds is a fantastic first step. And I am very irritated that the US is not in a place where they can say they have tanning beds banned.
Yeah, I know. And you know what's interesting, Erica? There was somebody I was talking to, I think it was like just in my DMs on Instagram. Somebody mentioned a really good point about, if we banned everything that was bad, people wouldn't have a choice of making a good choice, right? And I was like, wait, that's like a really interesting, like devil's advocate kind of perspective of like, if in that case, we need to ban alcohol and ban cigarettes and ban, all these things that are causing, sickness and death and harm. But I think that what the person was saying is that, as a society, we can have things accessible, but also we can also teach people on how to make good decisions and the right decisions, right? Because it is impossible to an extent to ban things, that are really bad for you. I'm not saying I'm against banning tanning beds, because I'd be the first to sign that petition. But I think that there's also something to be said about if something's just taken away from us, we don't have the opportunity to just
Mm,
make a stance and make the right
okay.
decision when we do have access to something that isn't good for us, if that makes
Hmm.
sense.
Yeah.
Do you understand what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
No, I think that's such an interesting perspective because, yeah,
Yeah.
you're absolutely correct. Like, we know smoking is bad. We know alcohol consumption in excess is bad. We know tanning is bad. I
Hmm.
wonder if, like when you have cigarettes, you have the warning on there, and alcohol,
Hmm.
you have the warning on there. And there's been a whole story that's come out about alcohol consumption and the US Surgeon General this week about, having to put additional disclaimers on alcohol. It makes me wonder if, like, when it does come to tanning beds, we sign the waiver that says, hey, I am acknowledging my risk and I'm not holding the person who is giving me the opportunity to tan liable for my skin cancer and possible death.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder if, you could do more. But I do think you're correct. We are making good strides. But at the
Hmm.
same time, you and I, Leah, are both like, we're on the polar extremes of this topic. And we're just like, this is not okay. We want it done. We want to protect our
Yeah.
young youth individuals from harming their skin and realizing later in life. So I understand the devil's advocacy point of it, but I'm also like so on the extreme of like, I just want to protect our young men and women.
100%. No, I agree. And there are stickers on those tanning beds because I saw them. Not only you
Right.
sign your life away, but there are stickers that have warning labels on those
I didn't know
beds.
that.
And I saw
Oh
them
God.
every single
Yeah.
time I went in there. And again, like it goes back to so many things. One of the biggest things is you never think it's going to happen to you
Right.
until it
Right.
does. And then it changes your life. And then you reassess and you reevaluate, how do you move forward? And whether that's a cancer diagnosis, whether that's any type of thing that happens to you in life, a car accident or something really bad that happens to you, if you're lucky enough to have a second chance and do better and make healthier
Mm.
decisions, like one, that's amazing blessing. And wouldn't you want to do better moving forward? And I know that's what happened with me. I know that's not everybody. There are people that have gotten skin cancer and continue to lay out in the sun and continue to not get skin checks. That is a little beyond me, but that's for another episode, another time. But I think it just comes down to, how do we move forward, to your point, Erica, on doing better, making better decisions, and educating, our youth out there on how to, do better with their skin and their largest organ. And maybe one day we'll live to see, or maybe your new baby boy will live to see, a country that has banned tanning beds. That would be amazing. I hope
Yeah.
that that happens one day, but I think it's hope that it's already happening in other parts of
Hmm.
the world. So I think if we can just have that momentum come over here, I think
Yeah.
we would be a lot better off, hopefully.
I agree. I totally agree. And, kind of talking about that heat wave from my former story kind of leads into my next story that talks about a push to cool Australian cities down may actually inadvertently increase skin cancer risks. So, the story is from The Conversation, and it talks about how Australian cities are becoming even hotter, both due to the way in which they're built, but also climate change plays a huge role and the extreme heat events that they are seeing. So, one thing I didn't know that I thought was super fascinating that this article touched on was that heat waves are Australia's most deadly type of natural disaster and severely affects their quality of life, which I was not aware of. But again, it makes total sense based off of their climate and where they're located and, being so close to the equator that this plays a huge role in how they live their lives. So, in these Australian cities, they've repurposed and kind of utilized these reflective materials, such as like lightly colored footpaths and roofs, to use basically the bounce of the solar radiation to go back into the atmosphere and reduce the temperatures on the ground. Now, while we love the idea of cooling the cities down, Leah, I'm sure your brain goes to the exact same place mine does when I hear reflective materials. So they have some unintended consequences. So, these reflective materials not only help with heat, but they also reflect UV radiation. So, this type of radiation is the dominant causes of skin cancers. So, one study, for example, found that reflective walls can increase UV exposure by up to 300% compared to walls with non reflective materials. Additionally, a new research study showed that UV exposure is rarely considered in urban planning policies unless the problem is addressed. These efforts to cool these Australian cities may really create a serious public health problem. And Leah, I will pause there because when I was reading the story, all I can think about is that scene from, oh my God, what was it? Like a Cinderella story where the evil stepmother is sitting outside with like the aluminum foil tanning. And that's all I could think about is like these individuals are literally just walking around with aluminum foil all around reflecting these UV rays at them. Weird
What a
example, I
picture.
know.
No, but like spot on. Gosh, that is really interesting. And it reminds me of it's not an Australian organization, but do a little plug for them. Impact Melanoma, which is a really great organization, melanoma organization in the United States. They're headquartered in Massachusetts in the Boston area. They do an initiative, at least for the last couple years, that talks about the importance of shade and how shade is so crucial to communities. And they've actually done a lot of data and done a lot of research and collected a lot of data around how growing up in a community with more shade versus less shade like really impacts your potential of getting skin cancer or melanoma, which I think is wild. But if you think about it, like when you look at your environment in your neighborhood, how many trees do you have? And if there's not a
Mhm.
lot of trees, are there a lot of tall buildings that are like structural shade? When you go to your local parks or beach, how many pavilions are there? How many places are there where you can sit under an umbrella or under like a roof structure or
Mhm.
anything like that? Like it was just so interesting for them to bring awareness to that. And so they do a lot of work with trying to plant more trees and to create more shade options in the community to try to mitigate the, increase of skin cancer and melanoma rising year after year. And so that's actually what I thought of, just kind of bring it back home, across the world, back to the US of what some organizations I think are trying to work on here. And not just melanoma, I think just in general, like, other type of like nature or ones that are really concerned about the planet. We want to plant more trees. We want to do that, just to better the earth as well, but also help better our skin too. So yeah, I thought that that was interesting too, Erica, when the article talked about how new research is showing that UV exposure is rarely considered in urban planning. Because what I thought about actually was vehicles. And now most newer
Mm.
cars are having the glass and oh my gosh, what is the word? The shields, the windshields, those are now
Mhm.
being made as UV protective, which I'm like, that is awesome. So I'm
Right.
like, if newer cars can do it, why are we not thinking about that for structures and homes? That's kind of
Right.
where my brain went. I'm not sure where yours went though, Erica.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that makes total sense. The other thing I was thinking about, Leah, while you were talking about, impact melanoma and how they're working on, do these convenient places where families go, like the park or the beach or wherever, are there opportunities for shade? And I was thinking back to my interview with Stephanie Kaufman from the Melanoma Research Alliance, and Coachella had just happened when I hopped on the phone with her, and she was talking about the fact that, yes, it was amazing that they had a sunscreen station that Neutrogena was partnering with. I believe it was Neutrogena, if I'm remembering correctly, was partnering with Coachella to provide sunscreen, and all of these celebrities were going and sharing TikTok videos of them putting on sunscreen. And Stephanie was like, that's amazing. But there was literally no shade at these
Mm,
events. And it seems like such an obvious thing because if it's there, we go back to how people associate heat with UV sometimes. Maybe they're like, I'm warm. I need to cool off, and they'll maybe seek some of those shade alternatives for that reason. But if you're
Yeah.
not providing any kind of shade, it's really hard to keep people protected. Like, what are
Mhm.
they supposed to do? They have to go about their everyday lives. And when you were talking about planting trees, that's exactly one of the things that local governments are looking into of, okay, what are some of the alternatives we can consider? And one is planting trees to provide shade. They're also fantastic for the environment and for the air
Mhm.
quality and everything in between. So that is one of the alternatives they're considering, which in my mind, Lee, I'm like, yes, plant all the trees. That is a total win-win.
Yeah, go crazy. Plant all the trees. I mean, especially in Australia. I mean, they need it. So,
Mhm.
yeah, well, I'm hopeful that potentially they can think of some innovative ways to do something like that. And, I think if Impact Melanoma is working on that here in the US, I'm hopeful that maybe some of the melanoma organizations in Australia can kind of put their brain powers together and figure out a solution for that. But yeah, very, very interesting article for sure. And that brings me to our last article, which involves, we talked a little bit about this before, the younger generation and sun safety. So this last article is titled Alarm Raised Over Troubling Shift in Gen Z Trend in Australia with Deadly Consequences. And the source of this article was from Yahoo Australia. And it really just talked about in the opening paragraph how there's a growing trend among young Australian women, including girls as young as 12, who are glorifying sun tanning and taking pride in bikini tan lines. And this behavior is often showcased on social media platforms. I know I've seen it. I've seen it on
Mhm.
TikTok. I've seen it on Instagram. And in the article, they were saying how health experts are warning that there is no safe way to tan, as exposure to ultraviolet UV radiation increases the risk of skin damage and skin cancer. Tanning is a sign of skin cells in trauma, indicating DNA damage, which a lot of people don't understand that. When you get a tan, you think everything's great, I look so much better. No, your tan is like literally meaning your skin is like crying for help. Like, stop
Yeah.
doing this to me. That's essentially what it's doing.
Yep.
And as we mentioned before, Australia has one of the highest rates of skin cancer globally, with 2 in every 3 Australians diagnosed with skin cancer by the age of 70. That is insane. But despite this information and this research and data, many young Australians underestimate it, which I get it because, like I mentioned before, Erica, for some reason, when you're young, you feel like you're invincible. You feel like nothing's ever going to happen to you. It will never be me, blah, blah, blah. And then it happens. And then you're like, oh my gosh. And then it also talked about how social media is playing a significant role in normalizing and promoting tanning trends among younger people, contributing to the resurgence of this risky behavior. And I've seen it too. Like, you brought up the MRA, Melanoma Research Alliance. I actually recently did a collab with them on social media, and it was words are escaping me today, but essentially we took somebody else's video from TikTok, and she was talking about how while she was in a tanning bed, she's recording herself saying that,
Yep.
or this. She said, I don't care essentially if I'm, gonna get sun damage or whatever, at least I'll like die hot and not pale or
Yeah.
something like that. And I'm paraphrasing it, but essentially,
Yeah.
like, she does not care what she is doing. And I basically like debunked that. And I was like, you know what? You should care, because
Yeah.
tanning beds are awful and, all this kind of stuff. So that is one of many thousands of videos that are essentially going viral, and people are
Mhm.
thinking that this is okay and acceptable, to tan. So in the article it was saying that, advocates suggest that current sun safety messages may not be effectively reaching young audiences. They recommend campaigns that highlight the visible aging effects of sun exposure and the harsh realities of skin cancer treatments to make sun safety more appealing. And that's why I talked about my scar in that video that I did with the MRA. And that's why I do what I do on social media. Like, I get it. In the moment, tanning feels cool. It feels good. You look good, yes. But let me tell you, going through surgery and having to deal with cancer, is not worth it. And having scars all over your body because you were once temporarily tan is not worth it. So again, at the end of the article, health experts caution against the use of tanning products promoted by influencers, emphasizing that there is no safe level of sun tanning. And experts advise using multiple forms of sun protection, including protective clothing, using sunscreen, seeking shade, avoiding sun exposure during those peak UV rays, and getting skin checks. And I'm really glad that I'm sad that I'm seeing these headlines like this, that this is a continuing problem that's happening. But I think the more articles that are out there with this, the more we can make a change and start to have a more positive influence on the younger generation. So what
Yeah,
are your
for
thoughts on this
sure.
last article, Eric?
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think one thing that this touches on that I think about like very, very often is the messaging that is being used and what audience they are reaching. And it's something I think a lot about with this podcast. And I think a lot about with low ultraviolet messaging, the products we put out, the imaging we put out. And it's super fascinating because we've done several tests when it comes to products and trying to reach the younger generation with these products and using imagery and using branding and messaging that really would resonate with this audience based off of trends we're seeing. And it is fascinating how much it doesn't resonate. And it is one concerning, but it also makes me super impressed and thankful for brands like Supergoop that are reaching these younger audiences. And I think there's so much we can learn from these brands that have successfully tapped into younger audiences and basically not even talk about skin cancer, but talk about skin aging and talk about
Mm-hmm.
wrinkles because that seems to be resonating with people. When I was kind of thinking through this story, one, I was like, tan lines are in. I remember tan lines being so tacky when I was in like, I don't even know, like when I was in like high school, it was like the thing is that you didn't want the tan lines. So you would untie your bikini top so that it wouldn't have the tan lines that you could see. So I find it so fascinating that that is like a cool, hip, trendy, sexy thing to do now because that was something we would actively avoid when we were
Yes.
younger.
Yes, 100%. No, I'm so glad you said that because that was the reason why I started using tanning beds because I didn't want tan lines. I
Yeah,
didn't want the bikini line.
right.
I wanted even tan. So the fact that, yeah, to your point that now that's in, very
Yeah,
interesting. But yeah, yeah, I'm really hoping that we can see a shift. But yes, to your point, Supergoop getting Sabrina Carpenter on board,
I know.
I think was a fantastic move on their part. And I hope that more sunscreen companies can partner with celebrities, singers, people of influence, as well as these melanoma and skin cancer organizations like MRF partnering with Teddy Mellencamp. Like
Yeah.
people are making very good strategic moves on connecting with people that have a platform and that have a huge audience to make a difference. I know it's made a
Yeah.
difference with MRF and Teddy. I can only imagine that more people have bought Supergoop than ever before after seeing Sabrina Carpenter use it. So I just think if
Hmm.
we continue to make it more appealing, to your point, even Erica, with the aging concept, we're living in a be young forever world right now. And how do we prevent aging? I mean, with all the things that now you can do to your face and your body and all that kind of stuff, I think if we do phrase it from that perspective, we
Hmm.
shouldn't have to do it that way. But if we're going to, sure, let's keep going with that. If that can
Right.
change people's behaviors in a positive way, sure, let's run with it.
Yep. I think it's so fascinating. I mean, there was a huge campaign that went around and I don't know who started it, but it resonated with me, the language of it. It was like, you're going to go when you're 40 or 30 and spend thousands of dollars on treatments that can be avoided right now by just applying sunscreen daily.
Yep.
And that started resonating with people because they're like, oh my gosh, well, I don't want to have sunspots. I don't want to have wrinkles, X, Y, and Z. And it makes it super easy to sell products like sunscreen. And I'm over here like, okay, how do we use this language to sell some sun protective clothing too? Because sunscreen is fantastic. but for the amount of time we spend outdoors, especially in countries like Australia and New Zealand, where or other tropical, close to the equator environments where you are spending so much time outside, you need more than sunscreen because the
Yep.
reality is we're all going to go and have a great time. We're going to be swimming and washing off sunscreen, and we're not going to be reapplying after that 50 to 80 minutes of
Mhm.
however long that sunscreen is effective for. To reapply, you get caught up in your life. Maybe you're drinking alcohol, which increases your UV exposure risk, and all these things that if you have a tool that you can just throw on and
Mhm.
not have to think about it, and it doesn't impede your ability to go fishing, go for a run, go surfing, swim, snorkel, whatever the heck you want to do.
Yeah.
Um, I just want everyone to have all the tools in their back pocket
Yeah.
to have fun. Like, come on now. It's as simple as that.
100%. 100%. Preach, girl. Preach.
You know, I'm always going to rant at least one time per episode. It's just a given, man. But I think that wraps us up for January, which is insane. Leanne and I were talking before we started recording this is we normally do our community win segment as part of this or have on a fantastic guest. And we really decided this time that we were going to focus on these stories and we weren't going to do community wins because we feel like this community could use a little bit of a breather, that the end of 2024 and beginning of 2025 really didn't feel like we had a lot to celebrate. And there are times where that is okay. And we're going to recoup and we're going to continue fighting and advocating and supporting each other and coming back somehow better and stronger than ever, even amid some of the worst life circumstances. So we're using this time to, focus on the beloved members of our community who are no longer with us, who we miss very dearly, and those who have received news recently that really did not kick off their year to the best way that they were hoping for. If you all are listening, we are thinking about you. We are advocating for you. We are praying for you. We are sending you energy. We are doing literally everything possible to be your advocates. So that's kind of how we wanted to wrap up this episode, is just saying, like, Dan, I get it. It's been hard, but we're going to be okay. We're going to be all right.
Yeah. We're going to be okay because we have each other. So this
Yeah.
community has been awesome. And even in the times of losing people and getting hard news around cancer, it feels better knowing that we have a community that understands.
Yeah.
I think that gives us hope in a lot of things. So yeah, maybe we'll get back to community wins in another episode.
Yeah. And we're going to do a fun spin on it. Leah has so many ideas for how you can shout out your Valentine and things like that for February's episode. So we're going to come back. We're going to keep going and doing the work that we're going to do, but we're going to take some time to recover and be mindful and love on each other as much as humanly possible.
Absolutely.
All right.
Well,
Yeah.
another great top 5 on the Tide. First one of 2025. Oh gosh, everything's rhyming. I love it.
It's
So many
perfect.
fives.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, that was a great introduction into 2025. I love talking about this topic, and I know we're going to be back in February with another great topic. But Leah, stay warm, stay out of the snow unless you have to, and I will see you super soon.
Sounds good. Thanks so much.